It's a bad time to be an infantry player in Rise of Kingdoms. In this video, I break down why that's the case and what Rise of Kingdoms needs to do to get infantry back into the meta. What's up everybody, Psych out here with another Rise of Kingdoms video. A lot of people like to play infantry. Infantry is a sort of a favorite mainstay troop type for many low spend and free to play players, and there's a really good reason for that. Infantry are pretty tanky troops on the field, sort of classically infantry, fit with lots of armies. You think about Roman legions and things like that, full of infantry. So a lot of people like to play infantry. Unfortunately, right now in Rise of Kingdoms, it is a tough time to be an infantry player, and this is for a few reasons. But the main reason is because of what is happening with the commander. So if we look at the commander history cycle in Rise of Kingdoms, a couple of things we know, and again, I'm talking about infantry versus archers versus cavalry players, and lots of players fall into one of these types. You sort of pick one as your main troop type. Nobody picks leadership, by the way. That would be weird. I don't think anybody has leadership as a troop type. It seemed like maybe they're going to make that be a thing for a while, but it doesn't seem like it's really working out. So if you're an infantry main, I think it's a tough time. And I think the reason it's a tough time, particularly when you hit the season of conquest, is because of what's going on with the commander. But if we step back historically and we say, okay, why were infantry so good, or what made infantry so good, or who were the great infantry commanders in Rise of Kingdoms? If we go all the way back to the beginning of the game, to pre-KVK1 to KVK2, we see that there are lots of really good infantry commanders, and we can even do this generationally. If we think back about, and it's a little weird because some of the commanders all started in the game, and talking about the early generations as a generation is a little weird, but we can think of it this way. One of the earliest sets of commanders, infantry commanders, was Richard the Lionheart, Richard I here, and Charles Martel, both very early on. You can get Richard in the wheel, you can get Charles Martel from the Mightiest Governor event, and he also is a gold key commander. So there's a lot of ways to get those two commanders early on in the game. And they're really, really strong. KVK1, both of these commanders are just really, really good. Some of the best legendary commanders you can have during KVK1. At the same time, or around about KVK1 now, you also get El Cid as an archer commander. So you might think about this as the Generation 1 archers as El Cid. Not that strong, doesn't have a lot of longevity in the game. And the other sort of early generation archer commander is YSG here. So those commanders you get early in the game. So that's sort of the first generation. And then for cavalry, it's Minamoto, kind of, I guess. It's a little weird because he is not a wheel commander. He's not an MGE commander. And the same thing with Double C. So that's kind of the first gen legendary cavalry commanders, Minamoto and Double C. Again, not a super impressive pair, although they've gotten a lot stronger now with the museum buff. So those are sort of the first generation, and we look at second generation, right? And to me, when you look at those pairs, okay, YSG is obviously really great, but El Cid not very impressive. Infantry are clearly at an advantage early on, and in addition to that, infantry also have commanders like Sun Tzu in the early game, who's probably the best, if not one of the best epics. They also have Bjorn, who's been added now also to the early game, and Bjorn is a really good commander as well, who's infantry. Versus if we look at the other epic commanders in the early game, Kusunoki is okay, but not a great archer commander. Same thing with Herman. Pelagius, Baibars is okay because of the AoE, but really you don't see a lot of high-performing commanders out of those. At least with Sun Tzu and Bjorn, you can use those KVK1, KVK2, and feel very comfortable with that. In fact, I think you could even use Sun Tzu a little further on in the game if you want. But when we get to Generation 2, we see infantry really continue to outperform. Alexander the Great comes on, and he's just a fantastic infantry commander. And then Constantine comes on. He's very good. KVK2, KVK3, you can use him in Sunset Canyon, a high performer, 5.5.5.1, and he's really, really strong. So infantry are really good. He's one of the top garrison commanders in KVK2 and KVK3. Whereas at the same time, we get for archers, Edward and Tamiris. Edward is really, that's it. KVK2 is kind of his thing, and after that, he really falls off. Tamiris you can use for a long time afterwards, but again, because paired with Edward, not super great. And then Saladin Khan, it's kind of the same situation. Saladin's very good, can use him for a long time. Khan has a very limited window and isn't very strong. So again, when we look at those pairs, Alex, Constantine have a much longer window or a much stronger set of commanders. So in the early game, infantry are really, really strong. You've got Richard, you've got Charles, you've got Constantine, you've got Alex. Really good commander pairs. You've got Sun Tzu, you've got Bjorn. You can do a lot with infantry in the early game. The problem starts when you hit Season of Conquest. And when you hit the Season of Conquest, you get Guan Yu. So again, it looks really good for infantry. This is probably the best infantry commander in the game. And you get him and bam, infantry is looking really strong. But then after that, things have really fallen off for infantry. If we go who came with Guan, that was Leonidas. And Leonidas is a pretty good commander. He's a pretty good infantry commander. The problem with Leonidas is he only goes with Guan. You just really can't put him anywhere else. I've done a whole bunch of testing with Guan and Leo, and the synergy is actually phenomenal, like the way those two work together. And so they're just a really fantastic pair, but Leo just doesn't really fit with anybody else, and he's not really a primary commander, and he doesn't work with anybody else very well as a secondary. So if you go Guan with Leo, which is a great march in the Season of Conquest, you don't know what to do with Alex. So where do I put Alex? And I'll get into some of these other infantry commanders here in a moment, but we get Guan and Leo, and it's still looking pretty good for infantry. But then for archers, we get Ramses and Artemisia, who are both very playable commanders in the Season of Conquest. And that's part of what happens here is the playability changes quite a bit. Ramses and Artemisia are very playable. And then for cavalry, we get Takeda and Attila. And both of those are again, very playable in the Season of Conquest. So the cavalry gets some much more playable marches and sort of are improving. Archers the same way, right? No more Edwards, no more El Cids. We've got Ramses, we've got Artemisia. And Guan and Leo are there for infantry, which is again a very strong march, very playable. But then things really start to drop off pretty dramatically. The next series of infantry commanders we got were Harold, who's not bad. He does a lot of damage, but he is very, very squishy. People have tried different combinations of pairing him with Trajan, trying to pair him with Pakal, and to give him some of that tankiness. But he's really a single target, isn't that great in the open field, and is really sort of settled in as a specialist in rallies. The Pakal Herald rally is really his special calling. He's got a rally skill. He does a lot of damage. He's got anti-swarm. When you pair him with Pakal's anti-swarm, they just basically become an unswarmable rally. But the problem is in the open field, they don't do anything. You can just ignore them and kill them last because there's no, it doesn't really matter. They're not packing enough punch to worry about. And so the Pakal Herald is not really a big threat in the open field. So Herald's kind of a letdown. At the same time, we also get Zenobia. Zenobia is a very specific garrison commander. While archers get Cyrus and Nebu. Nebu's a rally commander, can also be used in the open field. Cyrus clearly can be used in the open field in Season of Conquest. And cavalry gets William and Chandra. Chandra had a little window as a rally commander with XY that seems to have gone down now with Nevsky coming into the game. But William clearly is a commander that's very, very usable in Season of Conquest. Lots and lots of people use him. And then it even gets worse for infantry. CJ and Pakal come onto the scene. Pakal, again, is a very specialist role just for rallies. And CJ is, in my opinion, just very, very underperforming. Just not what you would have expected out of a 5th generation infantry commander. Single target damage. It is a lot of damage, and he boosts skill damage. He does some things that are nice, but for somebody with 5 skills that work in the open field, you would just expect this commander to be a heck of a lot better, sort of Alexander the Great level of performance, and he just isn't there. So this is what's gotten infantry in a lot of trouble. And then at the same time, in that same generation, we got Gilgamesh and Amanitore, both very playable. In the open field, rally, garrison, really great commanders to use for archers. And for cavalry, we got XY and Jadwiga. XY clearly a very playable, rallies, open field. Jadwiga, garrison for sort of a specialist role, I think, but garrison for cavalry. And then the most recent commanders we got into the game are cavalry, and that's Nevsky and Bertrand. Bertrand is sort of a playable. He seems to have some effectiveness in rallies. There's some pretty neat things about him in rallies. He has damage over time. In a rally, that works really well because you stay engaged the entire time with the target. So it seems to be okay with Bertrand in rallies. Nevsky, who I've done lots of videos on, is just amazing. So the point here is this. When we get to Season of Conquest, there are a lot of marches I can put together for cavalry. I think it's very easy to come up with cavalry marches. XY and Nevsky, Saladin and William, Attila, Takeda. I can put Bertrand with somebody, and I can use these in the open field. I can use these in rallies. I can even use Minamoto and Double C with the double museum buff. They're actually a very playable march now in Season of Conquest. So cavalry, very easy. I can come up with 3-4 marches that I can use in the field. So if I'm a cavalry main, no problem. I've got plenty of marches to choose from. If I'm an archer main, it's even more incredible. We've got Nebu and YSG, which is just a premier march. We've got Artemisia and a Manitory, or a Manitory Artemisia, which is just a great march. You can also put in Tommy in there with one of those. We've got Ramses and Gilgamesh and Cyrus. All can be used in the open field. They can Ramses can be paired with Tommy very easily. Ramses can be paired with YSG, right? They can pair up in lots of ways, and all of them can be used in the open field. They've got rally combinations. They've got garrison combinations in there. There's just a lot to like about those archers that we have available to us in the Season of Conquest. And that's just not the case for infantry right now. Right now, what do we have? We've got Guan and Leo, which is just an excellent march. We can go Guan and Alex if we don't want to invest in Leo. But then after that, there's kind of a drop-off, right? Let's say we have Guan and Leo together. What's my next infantry pair? I can go Alex and Harold, which does a lot of damage, but is really pretty squishy on the field, just gets kind of knocked down. Again, I mentioned you could go Pakal and Harold and leave sort of Alex on the bench, which is weird because Alex is really, really good in the open field. But nobody's going to hit your Pakal Harold, which is really what it wants. It wants to be hit a lot, and nobody's going to hit it. So that really doesn't do a lot for you either. You could go Alex with Richard, or Richard Alex. But the problem, in Season of Conquest, Richard just really doesn't hold up that well, especially with Gilgamesh on the field, and the extra damage that he does to anybody who's doing healing. Infantry are just in a lot of trouble. Same thing with Charles Martel. Even with the museum buff, he just isn't really that playable in the Season of Conquest. So infantry really need a big win here. And that's why I think, and I mentioned this in one of my recent videos, and I'll put a card at the top for that video, that infantry really needs something. They need some kind of a boost. They need another commander to come on who can do a whole lot of things. Maybe the commander can rally, but also be in the open field. Maybe they can be garrison and also in the open field. Because that's what we're seeing with some of these archer. That's what we're seeing with some of these even cavalry commanders, is they have a lot of versatility. They can work in a lot of ways. They do a ton of damage. They can be, again, used in many open field circumstances. And infantry really needs someone who can do that right now, because if they don't get one, if this next generation, and that's what we expect the next commander will be an infantry commander. If we don't get an infantry commander who really is skilled in the open field, if we don't get one who can do some AoE, right? If we get another one of these niche commanders that is, just garrison only or just rally specific only, I think it's going to be really hard times for infantry players out there, because it's just too hard to make 3 really playable infantry marches right now. In fact, you could even make the case that it's hard to make 2 really playable infantry marches in the Season of Conquest. So infantry sort of had this heyday early on with all these great commanders, all the best commanders, and then that really fades off. And especially with the introduction of Nevsky, cavalry have jumped way up in terms of value and playability in Rise of Kingdoms. So I don't know what's going to happen, of course, but I think this is why I advise infantry players to be saving up those sculptures, because I just have a feeling that the only way to keep infantry viable in Rise of Kingdoms is if they put out a new commander sort of at Guan Yu's level of ability, playability, talent, skills. All of that is what we're going to have to see if we want to see infantry remain a main troop type that people can play, or people play as a main troop type in Rise of Kingdoms. that's really all I want to say about that. Look, we're getting ready for the season of conquest here. We are at the troop training stage. We got about 20 hours left. Right now, we're in first place in the rankings. I don't know where we're gonna end up in that. We do have allies. I think I mentioned in our last video. I wasn't sure what allies we had. Let me pull that up here. Maybe can I show it this way? I don't even know. Well, you can see that we are Earth Camp. We are allied with the Fire Camp. That's 1117 and 1027. Those are our allies, and of course, we are also with 1142, the other Earth kingdom. So that's what we're going to be looking forward to in this heroic anthem. Should be a lot of fun, and of course, I'll be keeping you updated as we go along. And hey, let me know what you think down below. Do you think infantry are in big trouble? Do you think infantry players are desperate for a new S-tier level commander to really keep them viable in Rise of Kingdoms? Let me know down below in the comments and I'll check them out. Thanks so much for coming by, everybody. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.